Hello and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, my name is Robin and I am your friendly neighbourhood queer booktuber. Christmas is around the corner, it's dark, it's cold, it's blanket season, it's hot chocolate season, and what a better way to kick off the festive season than by talking about a spooky book. This video is almost me connecting with the roots of my very first videos and the original videos on my channel. One of my, I think it was my third video I ever uploaded on this channel was Jo March, a queer icon. Short answer, yes. Long answer, you should definitely watch the video. And I remember having so much fun with that video. Being queer and seeing like queer analogies and queer writing, queer characters is something that's very traditionally straight or has been seen as straight a book that's been around for hundreds of years. It's quite exciting. It's like a really fun game of Where's Waldo, but if you find Waldo, hordes of straight people come into your comment section saying that you're looking too hard. I really like that aspect of it. These are probably the same people that say that the curtain is just blue as well, so that's my read. There you go, mic drop moment, boom. This video is a return to form, as you may say, because I recently read The Haunting of Hill House, this is a special edition by the way, and I got it for like £8 in a TK Maxx, and it's gorgeous. I recently read this book, and this book is known as being one of the scariest books ever written, the blueprint for horror books, like, or horror in general, and it has countless TV shows based on this. It even has stories nowadays written based on this book. This book is a continuously giving of inspiration, and it came out just under 100 years ago. I would say like 20 years, I don't know, like it came out in 1956, and for it to have such an impact on the writing community and just general horror that we have today, because a lot of horror directors, a lot of horror writers will use this book as like, this is the book that I use as my inspiration, is kind of incredible. And it's a little bit queer. Personally, I would say it has a lot more gay tension in than some actively queer books that I read that come out at the moment, and that is saying a lot. So last month I challenged myself to read as many spooky books as possible for spooky season or Halloween season, and as someone who has never read this book, I just thought I have to read it. It's a classic, and like I said, it is still talked about to this very day. And so it seems not right to skip over this book. And as someone who prides themselves on reading only queer books, I was like, this is my one exception, alright? She's a classic, I have to do it. And surprise, surprise, it's like I find them. It's like I sense them and I find them. There is, I believe, in queerness in this book, and this is me making my case, if you will, to why The Haunting of Hill House may be queer. So if you have never heard of this book, I will be doing massive spoilers, as in I will be talking about everything that happens in this book, especially in this breakdown about what the book is. So if you've never read the book and you would like to read the book, then this is your chance to sort of go away and come back after you've read it. Definitely suggest that you do read it. It's a really incredible book, even without the queer context. So I will be talking heavily about this book, and so major spoilers ahead, but it came out in 1959, so if you haven't read it yet, it's your own fault if you're still watching. So like I said, this book was published in 1959 by Shirley Jackson, and this was actually her 5th book. I will say it's like one of her most notable ones, I think, but she is a very famous US author. This book was critically acclaimed when it was released as well. It made the New York Times Best Fiction list of 1959, and it received a nomination for a National Booker Award in 1960. So it was an incredible book when it was produced, and you know, it's the gift that keeps on giving because we're still talking about it today. I will say, no Goodreads awards though, so it can't have been that good back in the day, alright? This book follows the main POV of Eleanor Vance. She is 32 and she has said to have some experiences with ghosts in her childhood, and she has also quoted to have had paranormal experiences such as making rocks rain from the sky and stuff like that. And because of this, she has been invited to stay at Hill House. She receives a letter from Dr. John Montague, who is a person who wants to rock the world of parapsychology, which is basically ghosts. He's a ghost hunter, but like scientific terms. And what he wants to do is to rent a house out that has a reputation of being haunted and put people who have had run-ins with paranormal beings in their lives and put them in the house and sort of prove that ghosts are real. He sent out letters to a wide bunch, I think it says something like hundreds of people, and only 2 people replied to those letters, which is Eleanor Vance and Theodora. I don't think we get her last name, but we get to meet her soon. Eleanor's family is not happy about this. Eleanor used to be her primary carer for her mother until her mother passed away, and now she lives with her sister, and all of her family say it's not a good idea for her to go to this house. So she ends up stealing their car and driving to the house without their wishes, basically. As Eleanor turns up to the house, she gets this dread that she has been, almost like the house is telling her that she needs to go home, and she can feel this dread, and then she feels like just running away. But then she is met by the house's caretakers, who also say that you should probably go home because this place is horrible. And these caretakers are not very nice to her, but they do warn her and say that you should go home because this is not the place for you. But Eleanor persists because she feels like she sort of has to do this now because she's run away, she's taken the car, and this feels like her step into freedom after being her mother's primary carer. So she goes into the gates and arrives there and realises that she is very terrified of this house once she gets inside. It's a very terrifying place, and the caretakers have definitely not warmed her up to being there. And the next person to then turn up to the house is Theodora. Eleanor is instantly drawn to Theodora, and I do believe in this moment it is because of the fear that she feels like this, but it's a very interesting introduction. And they decide to go out together, explore the grounds, and when they come back from the grounds, they see that Dr. Montague has turned up, and he has turned up with someone called Luke. We find out that Luke is going to inherit the house when his auntie dies. His auntie owns the house. When Dr. Montague signed to say that he wanted to rent this place for a month, it was sort of in the contract that someone of the family had to be there as well to experience these things, to also see if the house was haunted. And so that is where Luke comes into it. So there are 4 people who are going to be staying in this house for the duration, basically. They all have dinner, they talk about the house's history, and they stay there for about a week while weird things keep happening, banging on doors, horrible smells, sights of dogs and animals running across the floor. A lot of very spooky things happen. And then we have the ghost almost taunting Eleanor as well, as we see that the ghost starts writing "Come home, Eleanor" on the walls. But everyone begins to be very suspicious, and they think that Eleanor has done this herself. She's been gaslighted by 2 people, the house and the people in the house, who don't believe that she is not doing this. And so she obviously begins to lose her mind and her senses and doesn't know what's real and what's not anymore. Later on in the book, we meet Mrs. Montague, which is obviously Dr. Montague's wife, and she's horrible. She's a horrible person, and I also wish she wasn't a character in the book because she really doesn't bring anything to the book. But beside from my feeling from her, she turns up to the book, she berates Dr. Montague and tells him that he hasn't done enough and she's going to get the results because he hasn't done enough. And so she uses a planchette to talk to the spirits, and there is a spirit called Nell, which is obviously short for Eleanor, and this spirit says that she wants to go home. And everyone, again, is suspicious of Eleanor or freaked out by this now, but this is Eleanor sort of slips at this point and feels like she is becoming the house, and she can hear things inside the house no matter where she is. She can hear the whole house. And so she does begin to lose her mind, and so everyone agrees that Eleanor should be sent home the next morning. And so Eleanor gets in the car, and this is the major spoiler, so I'm sorry, like, couple wind forward a little bit, but Eleanor then commits suicide and drives straight into an oak tree, and the experiment is then obviously cancelled. Everyone goes home. Dr. Montague prints the results of his experiment, and everyone doesn't believe him, basically, and that is the whole book. It is technically a very, very short book. I did the audiobook, which is the best way to consume this book, I promise you. I did the audiobook, and I think it was only like 3.5 hours or something like that, which is not a long time at all for an audiobook. So it's definitely worth the read. I think it's about 150 pages. It's a very short, very effective horror book. And so you might listen to me just talk about what the book is and what the book is about and go, Robin, you said this was a queer, we're looking into the queer history of this book, and that's exactly right. So despite my feelings on the book, I think it is a 5-star book. I did not like some of the characters, and originally it was like a 3.5 star, because especially the way that people talk about this book, it's not as terrifying as you think it would be when you read it. But it's sort of like a book that stays with you when you hear knocking sounds and stuff like that. It sort of like jumps up in your memory. So I don't know, and I think a lot of people have a very similar experience with the book. That's where the scary part of the book comes from. But what is interesting to me and what I wanted to talk about in this video is the relationship between Eleanor and Theodora, and is this book a queer book? They both have a very turbulent relationship, especially towards the end, but that is from the suspicion that Eleanor is doing this to herself, and obviously the house and what it is doing, and also Eleanor's suspicion of everybody else leaving her out. So I don't want to talk about the back end of the book and after everything goes downhill, but I will be bringing up quotes and focusing on their relationship before the haunted house and how it can be deemed as queer and how I took it as queer as well. So Theodora is the opposite of Eleanor. Eleanor is very anxious, she's very small. Again, her life has been consumed by looking after her mother. So she doesn't really have a personality, she doesn't have any hobbies, and she doesn't have any friends, or I guess she's a very, very lonely person, and she's very overcritical of everything she does and everything she says. Theodora is the polar opposite to Eleanor. Theodora has her own apartment, she's fashionable, she's young, she's brash, she doesn't really care about what people say. She's everything Eleanor is not. Theodora also alludes to having an ex-girlfriend, like she talks about the reasons why she's coming to Hill House, and she says that she has a roommate that she had a big falling out with, and that is sort of the reason why she's here. So I think making this roommate genderless in itself, I think the context of when this book came out in 1959 is a very huge detail for me. Bringing up this genderless thing and how she talks about this argument, it doesn't just seem like a roommate, I've drunk your milk argument sort of thing. So we dive a little bit deeper into that actually when they start talking about each other's living situations, and Theodora is asked by Eleanor, "Are you married?" And the next line after that says, "There was a little silence and then Theodora laughed quickly and said no." The way I read it, the laugh was sort of like her laughing at the idea of heterosexual marriage and or like thinking of herself in the position of being in a heterosexual marriage, or like laughing as like having a secret sort of thing. But again, I do understand that this could be read at her laughing at the idea of being tied down to a man, because she is a very independent woman and she's like laughing at like oh no, God, I could never see myself in that position sort of thing. I don't think she's the type of person to be embarrassed, so I don't think it's an embarrassed laugh to say that she isn't married for her age. So that one's not even on the cards for me. We'll say that both Theodora and Eleanor are very physical towards each other. They're always wanting to touch each other, hug each other, they always want to be around each other. I do think the fear of the house plays into that a lot. I do believe that. But I think with how much they want to touch each other and just it's a lot more than girl friendship. Yeah, they touch hands, they cuddle together, and in one section Eleanor is wearing Theodora's nightgown and Theodora just seems to be fine with it. We get to see Eleanor's POV the entire time, so again, I do believe that the fear plays into their relationship, but we also, while this is happening, we get to see how Eleanor attaches herself to Theodora and how Eleanor just has to be around her, is infatuated by her, says like how she daydreams about her when they're together, and I don't think that one's the fear for me. You know, you're not thinking about the spooky house you're in, you're just thinking about how to touch this other woman, and that sounds pretty gay to me. There is this paragraph in the very beginning of the book where Eleanor meets Theodora, and when they decide to go exploring together before everyone turns up, and they've just had a run-in with one of the caretakers. So this is how Eleanor describes Theodora. "For a moment her face was thin with anger, and Eleanor thought, I hope she never looks at me like that, and was surprised, remembering that she was always shy with strangers, awkward and timid, and yet had come in no more than half an hour to think of Theodora as close and vital, someone whose anger would be frightening." So with this obviously seeing Theodora have a go at the caretaker and seeing the anger, she does not want to be on the receiving end of that, but she also describes her as vital and close. And again, I do think the fear plays a massive part into this, but I also think that Eleanor is a very lonely person, and I have read the critique that Eleanor is not in love with Theodora, but she is just someone who is very lonely and just wants everybody to love her because she has not had that before. And I can see that. I do see these critiques on it. And I'm taking that into account as well. But for me, as a queer person reading this, it just seems very queer-coded. I do totally think that all of those factors play into this, but I think that she has seen someone who she aspires to be and has sort of attached herself to it, and it has a, how to say, an infatuation with her to the point where it could be romantic. But again, this was the 1959, so we don't say that part out loud, you know? This is just evidence of them wanting to be around each other and touching them. So later on we have Theodora had abandoned any attempt at a chair and put herself down on the hearthrug, cross-legged and drowsy. Eleanor wanted to sit on the hearthrug beside her. Later on in that chapter we also have Eleanor thought wisely and without thinking moved and sat on the floor beside Theodora. She waited a minute for Theodora to speak and then said agreeably, "Still hard to believe you are really here." I'm just saying that I just feel like Eleanor is trying, but she's got no riz. Do you know? Eleanor gives me like, I wish there was other girls here to kiss vibes. And then when, you know, the other girl says same, like ready for it, she goes, "Oh, that's nice." Like, she seems like one of those lesbians. We're all the same lesbian, as in we're all like that. But this is what this quote in specifics, this is what this gives me of like being overly nice in the place of something else, because you don't know how to be romantic, you don't know how to do that. So you're just very nice and complimentive instead. A page later, Theodora is laughing about how horrible she is, and Eleanor makes the same comment because she wants to fit in. And Theodora turns around and says, "Don't make fun of me, you're sweet and pleasant and everyone likes you very much. Luke has fallen madly in love with you and I'm jealous." For me, this was a highlight because Theodora's background, I don't think that she is jealous of any man and his approaches and his compliments and his love. She doesn't strike me as the sort of character that would be like, "I'm so jealous that a man finds you attractive." Like, she does not give that at all. Again, she is a very free spirit, and I don't think she knows Eleanor well enough, or she is nice enough to Eleanor to justify her saying this as to make her feel better about herself. She is not that type of character either. I do think that she is saying this as, "I'm jealous that he gets to think that way about you." That's the way I'm taking it. And it just, in my mind, seems like the only viable passage to make that comment as well. This is later on in the book, but this is just a short quote that Theodora wakes Eleanor up and says, "How pretty you look this morning, my Nell. This curious life agrees with you." I just don't agree that this is a straight book. I don't think that these are two straight people, let's just put it that way. You're gonna look at these examples and go, "Robin, this is just friendship." For me, the Jo March video, that's a very clear-cut case that Jo March is queer, just because of Louisa May Alcott's background and what she has said in the past, and Jo as a character, and how Jo many times have just stated that she wishes she was a boy, like clear as day, printed on paper. But I still feel like this friendship that they have before everything goes sour is more tender, sympathetic, and just more lovely than a normal friendship. Eleanor is very intertwined with Theodora, and Theodora does seem like the type to be like, "Oh well, I'm getting the attention, so I am happy no matter the way it's coming to me." But the way that they are with each other, the touchy-feely way of each other, and just when I was reading this, I texted my friend who had been telling me to read this for a while and said, "You didn't tell me gay people are in this book." I immediately, my first thought went to was like, this book is gay. Like, these people are gay, and you can't convince me otherwise. And I would like to preface this and say that this book is obviously not like Oscar Wilde levels of queerness, but this is my queer Waldo. Like I said, this is the type of book that as a straight person and just go all the way through it and not really think anything else of this book. But as a queer person, it just feels like another layer has been added to this book for me. I think it's very interesting, and when I was googling it, a lot of other people had the sort of same thoughts with a lot of, I guess it had the same response as the Jo March video. I don't want to keep comparing it, but when I did my research for the Jo March video, a lot of people were saying she's just, you know, being a tomboy doesn't equal lesbianism. And as much I fully agree, and how Jo March was a, you know, raging feminist, and back in the 1800s that just wasn't a thing. There was other instances that Jo March was like, that is a gay person. Researching this video and googling like, who is gay? Are these people gay? And a lot of people going, no, they actually have like a motherly relationship. They don't. They do not. And I just think people say that just because they don't like gay people. I'm sorry, I'm saying it. But if a gay person goes, this feels queer, and you go, no, they have like a sisterly bond or like a family bond, it's homophobia. I'm sorry, I'm being the one to say it. I think because having that experience now researching both of these books, it only affirms it further for me that these two are queer characters. And this book is only a very, very short book, which is a shame because I wish we could just explore their dynamic a little bit further, but we just have what we have. And I think especially before going down that hill, they have a very close and very quickly bonded relationship. They think quite fondly of each other. I think it's really interesting, especially towards the end of the book, when Eleanor gets in the car. She's basically forced into the car by Dr. Montague and is like, bye, see ya, go, bye. And she feels very betrayed, especially by Theodora, because why didn't Theodora stop her? Why didn't Theodora come and say hello? And there's a part where like Theodora even touches her hand and is saying how much, you know, she's gonna miss her and stuff like that. So it's a very tender relationship I think that they have. What is the conclusion to this? I don't think this is as clear cut as Jo March, but do I think that there is queerness in there? Yes. And the great thing about books is we all get something different out of books. So if you read this book and you were like, these bitches are queer, then welcome to the club. I think it's great, and I think especially for queer representation in media, we don't have a lot of... It is better now than it has ever been, but when reading classical books, trying to find queer representation is almost non-existent. So if you can find a slither of yourself in a classical book, then I think that's important, and I think that's the best thing that a book can give you. I think it's really interesting. I just think it's a really interesting book. I think it's a really fantastic book. I understand why it is the cornerstone for horror books. I think it is a fantastically written book, and I have nothing but praise for the book as a standalone horror. But I think that these two characters are very, very interesting. I'm so happy to have done this again because I've been wanting to make this like a series. Like maybe I'll read some more classical books and try and unpick these queerness in books. I remember bringing out the first one a year ago and was like, I really want to do this as a series because I do have so much fun researching and just seeing everyone's different opinions, because obviously everyone has a different opinion when they read a book, and it's amazing to have a conversation around a piece of media. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff, and I shall see you later.